Om Asajaya Manta Anutana Malaganta Malavanasa Klosajam Pramado Rakato Malam Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Sloth is the rust of all good and beautiful things. Negligence is the rust of the watchman. Non-recitation of scriptures is the rust of monasteries. And lack of spiritual self-effort is the rust of households. Om peace, peace, peace. Om satyena labhyastapassa hyesa atma samyagyanena brahmacharyena nityam antaha sharirehi jyotirmayo hi shubraha yam pashanti atayaha kshinadoshaha. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. The Atman, the indivisible self, in all beings and all things, is realized by knowledge, by austerity, by moderation, and by veracity. All of these constantly cultivated. When mental impurities dissolve due to this practice, then the seer beholds it naturally, existing everywhere and in everything, even here in this very body. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karbhavai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. We find ourselves all present here now as we gather for the second class on the rust of spiritual life, or sadhana, how to do away with the rust of spiritual life. And the opening chant from the Dhammapada by Lord Buddha suggests very strongly that we householders need to be careful of that corrosion that connects over the soul and over the mind and over our energy via lack of spiritual self-effort. And we must declare that to go beyond praying once a week or over your meals once a day or something is what we mean by that in a Western culture. That there has to be some self-exertion on the inner planes or within you to break down these barriers to a consummate spiritual life, also to wear away that rust that corrodes the connections between our outer world and our inner world. We know that there's a kingdoms of heaven within us, or our Father's mansion has many chambers, if you want to put it that way, and that there are pathways, nadis, the yogis say, leading inwards to this. So we need to keep these wide open and with the energy flowing along it. So that's why we sit with a straight spine and we breathe whenever we feel like tamas is coming upon us. Here, before the live streaming audience joined us, I asked everyone whether they were T, R, or S today. whether tamas was predominant, whether rajas was predominant, or whether sattva was predominant. And they all gave their answers accordingly. So at least to keep oneself in a sattvic state of mind, rather than restless or slothful, as we just chanted from Dhammapada of Lord Buddha, that sloth is the rust of all things good and beautiful. So to keep ourselves in a fine and fettle condition that way, we need to follow the basics at least. Sit straight, breathe. Think about the great practices and the great observances. Just to even think about nonviolence or truthfulness or non-covetousness, non-attachment, about your ishtam, about austerities you can do to widen yourself, to expand the mind so it can know Brahman, as the Upanishads say. It's a matter of food and posture and breathing, yes, but those are, you might say, the first echelons of getting back into yoga, or yoga as practice. We want to clear those nadis and open up those worlds so that we can start to dwell beyond all TR and S. That is, we can actually get to a Triguna state. One of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples was named Trigunatitananda. And speaking of the great master Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa, today is Jagadatri Puja. And so we meet on an auspicious day. Jagadatri is the Divine Mother of the Universe, of golden hue and adorned into red, and jewels and ornaments, a beautiful spectacle and sight and vision for her votaries. Holy Mother's family was worshipping Jagadatri. And we've all been to India, or some of us have, and seen that beautiful temple of Jagadatri in Jairombati, where Holy Mother was born. Vaikunta Hatte Lakshmi Elo, as the beautiful song to Holy Mother sings. She who was born as Lakshmi in Vaikunta has now been born as Sharda in Jairombati. So this Jagadatri comes with her, and Kali comes with her, and Durga comes with her, and Parvati comes with her. She's this unique soul now that became the only woman to head a religious order of millions of people. Now 5 million people following Sri Ramakrishna and this great goddess that came with him, Sri Sharda. We're very fortunate to be among those 5 million. But then, as far as all the other billions out there, we hope they found their path, and we like to share with them the Dharma, which comes from our path, the paths of India: Yoga, Samkhya, Vedanta, and Vaishnavism, and Shaivism, and Shaktism, Divine Mother worship itself, and many, many other beautiful paths that are there that we can partake of. They're like tastes or aromas for our inner senses, and they speak of inner elements, air, earth, fire, water, and ether in their subtle form, visionary worlds that you can visit with your consciousness when you have to leave your body and senses behind. Jatone hridaye reko ararini shamamake. So come, let's go and see Shama. Let's go and see Divine Mother of the Universe inside the heart, in the chamber of the heart. Come, O mind. But when you come, O mind, remember you have to leave the 5 senses outside. And you have to leave the 5 elements outside. You're leaving the outer show, the phenomena of this world, and you're going to these inner, subtler realms. So you're going to have to awaken subtle senses, and eventually even go beyond your subtle senses to the causal realm, where everything is just in a seed state. Basically, then if you're talking about a gross world, an inner world, and a causal world, gross, subtle, and causal, you're also talking about T, R, and S. That is tamas, rajas, and sattva. And if you want the best guide to tour those worlds and not get attached to them as you do, then Divine Mother of the Universe would be your choice. Can't be any better choice than having Divine Mother and her mantra with you at all times to protect you from various ills that can be there, attachments, and keep you on course, keep you striving, so that this rust of spiritual life doesn't collect. And this chart I left up here and brought with me to show you this bucket of rusty nails that we looked at last time. Because if you were under the auspice of someone like Divine Mother Jagadatri, Jagat means world and Datri means holder, to hold. So she holds all these worlds within her, and it's much the same with her children. They also hold all these worlds within them, but they have to become more and more aware of them as she's fully aware. She is awareness. So she's aware when parts of her marvelous logas, or these sets of worlds, become darksome, become benighted, you see, because of the people there in these worlds not keeping their minds luminous. Remember, we studied Manaha Prana Sambandha some weeks ago, or months ago by now, and looked at how to connect the energy, connect the mind to the prana via this, the mind to illumination really via this prana, via this energy, divine energy. Manaha Prana Sambandha is the Sanskrit word. So connecting this prana and this body and to a more luminous state of our awareness. Very important to keep that as an ideal and remain fully present for that. Whether you're sitting at a 3-hour puja or a 3-hour class, which is a kind of a puja, as we celebrate here, on a holy day like this, whether you're doing a 7-day or hopefully only 5-day work week and having a weekend off for spiritual pursuits, whatever it is that you're doing and engaging in, then you want to be doing that with these higher ideals in mind. As soon as you let the higher ideals out the door, then life loses its meaning. And it's just a simple fact. If you can train the mind to hold higher ideals, then everything flows easier, and you get the benefit out of your experiences. You extract the essence out of your existence. And every great balanced yogi or seer or rishi will tell you the same thing, and they'll also insist that this is the only way to live. Our own Swami Brahmananda, the beloved Rakal of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, was asked once, Swami, why, Maharaj, if you found out that none of this truth was actual, if God did not exist, as it were, what would you do? And he said, well, I wouldn't live any different than I'm living now in the Dharma. So if the mind has created everything, that has projected it, then we sort of have to bow to the mind in that way and say, well, if you're such a facile and magnificent thing that you have billions of collective sparks and you have billions more individual sparks, and you have this trinity, which is a cosmic aspect of you, then I bow to you, O mind, and everything that you project is a marvelous thing. So in that way, you put yourself on the right auspice, under the right auspice with the mind on all 3 levels, which is again sort of like saying TR and S. There's a lot of tamas out here, and a lot of rajas in heaven, and a lot of sattva with the Trinity. So holding this higher ideal is the point. So in order to do that, you might want to entertain a few lower ideals, like a bucket of rusty nails. It just actually reminds me that there was a clown when I was young. I was living in Portland, Oregon, across the river from my teacher. I didn't know he was there at the time, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj. Bliss and peace be upon him. But there was a TV program in the morning, and it was a clown, and he was called Rusty Nails. I just thought of that for the first time in like 50 years, right now. And Rusty Nails, I remember him, he was a clown. And we watched him in the morning sometimes when we got up. Back in Portland, did you ever see Rusty Nails?
I heard that.
Well, very apropos here, I don't know what kind of a soul he was because I didn't know him, and he's long passed, I'm sure, by now. But that's rather the point. You might want to entertain a lower ideal, like a bucket of rusty nails, to get yourself galvanized. Have you heard of galvanized steel? You see, I am full of puns today, I know, sorry. But some of these nails, they get rusty like here, and then, they fuse into clumps of rusty nails, and then you have to, break them apart. And then dip them in a salt solution, we were saying last week, so that you get all the rust off of them, and they could actually be used for something again, for a higher purpose. So we started out with that chart yesterday, and the last Sunday. This is our second class then, and we, in order to remind us, that is, remind the mind, take this quote up here, for instance. It says, like nails left out in the rain in a bucket on a deserted construction site, gradually fusing with one another into lumps of rusty iron. Similarly, the neglected and untrained mind forms complexes of residual karma called samskaras that impede spiritual progress and dictate the unhealthy condition of future births in ignorance. So we wanted to study samskaras, so I resurrected 2 old charts from years ago called Samskaras in the Human Mind and the content of a samskara. What's a samskara in your mind filled with? So we'll look at those soon. But we also, if you remember last week, looked at the 3 kinds of being. You might call them TR and S too, Thomas, Rogers, and Sattva. The animalistic, the heroic, and the divine. And a couple people wrote to me since last week who had tuned into the live streaming class last Sunday and said that they had remembered that teaching out of Tantra, that even the animalistic, even the devotees fall into an animalistic tendency, that is, they still behave somewhat like their animal counterpoints, so that is something that gets weaned out of one when practice begins to be engaged in. That's called sadhana. So sadhana is a cutting-edge word. We were on the way to the class today, driving the car, and I was remembering how samskaras in the mind, as this lovely quote reminds us, persist. And if you were to ask, where do samskaras come from and what do they consist of, then you'd have to say 2-part answer. First, they come from experiences you've had in this lifetime. So if you've reached ripe old age of 50 or 60 or older, and or even if you're younger and you begin to inspect the mind, you find out that many of the experiences you've had in the earlier life formed complexes in you or impressions that make you act a certain way, think a certain way. And that can become rather habitual, that way of thinking. People think in one way that they're most comfortable in. It's not necessarily the best way to think. Like, say, with narrow-minded people who say, oh, my religion is the only way, or something like that. Then there's a way of keeping a higher ideal, as we were just saying, that all religions are pathways leading to God would be a much higher way to keep it. So if you were keeping your mind on that ideal, your mind would get used to the idea of expansiveness, openness, and would get rid of the rust of hypocrisy and narrowness. And you would carry that into your next lifetime. So you have to look both backwards and forwards. Now we know the teachings of the 3 phases of time, past, present, and future, is that the devotee doesn't want to spend a lot of time brooding on the past, maybe none would be better, and doesn't want to project into the future, but wants to stay as close to the ongoing moment as possible. Not the present, but the eternal moment. It's good to start with the present because that's more sattvic, but then you have to refine the present into an eternal moment where you begin to transcend the idea of time, the idea of space, and the idea of karma, cause and effect. So that study of the 3 phases of time then becomes very important for the devotee. For most people, the 3 phases of time are just that, living in a pleasurable moment, brooding on what happened to them in the past, and then projecting into the future with hope. So brooding and hope, not our favorite qualities as spiritual aspirants. We need to live more close to the cutting edge of Mother Kali's sword, as we say here on Jagadatri Puja, and keep everything sharp and clean. Even swords can gather corrosion, you see, so their blades have to be sharpened all the time. But my point in bringing this up mainly is that brooding on the past is the content of a samskara. And that would be the answer to part A. But part B, you would know that there's a samskara from a past lifetime. And therefore you could also then assume that anything you do in this particular lifetime will also be the samskara for a next lifetime, if you're not careful. Of course, samskaras are positive, negative, and mixed, as we will see in some of these charts we'll look at today. But when you're looking at a past samskara, then you have something that's formed in the past, and you have to be careful to undo that, like a bucket of rusty nails. Find yourself a hammer and another bucket of salt solution, and get busy, take away that rust. And then in this lifetime, make sure you keep up the standard. Keep yourself pure, keep yourself thinking high ideal, keep breathing, keep practicing your posture, keep reading the scriptures, keep meditating, keep holding the ideal of serving God and human beings. In other words, practice the 4 yogas, which are, as Vivekananda said, the new religion of this age. Keep that up every day. Think about it every day. To think about something is to actually bring it into existence, because that's what the mind did. It thought about things and everything appeared. As soon as it stopped thinking about them, like in deep sleep, everything disappeared. So the mind has this ability to turn off and turn on. So you have to be very careful about what you do in this particular day-to-day movement of things. Like I remembered today, the thought of my mother, you see, was as a devotee of God. I actually brought the Vedanta to her in her old age, and she took Ramakrishna as her ideal, and also liked the sound of the Mahavakyas, liked the idea of formless reality. So I was taking care of her in her old age, and you know, she was like this, and I was trying to unpeel her hands, and she said, "I don't know why it's like that." And I said, "You're holding a psychic Kleenex. You see, let go." So all her life, you know, in her old age, she had a cough and a runny nose. She didn't have a cold, but she was just always coughing in her old age, and her nose was always running, so she'd always hold a Kleenex. So her hand fixed in this position, you see. And then when there was no Kleenex there, she would still hold that. That's just exactly like the mind holding something that it's not healthy for it, and it gets fixed in that position, or even this posture, and it's kind of an asana. And then later on, even when there's nothing there, the psychic Kleenex she's still holding on to it. She can't let it go. So I peel her hand back, and it goes back to the same position. It's just very much like the mind and what it holds. It'll do that in another lifetime. You'll wonder why a person is the way they are, why they're narrow, why they're full of hate, why they have anger, why they're jealous, why they're confused, why they're dim, and unwilling to change, unwilling to grow, stodgy, slothful. The rust is set in. And that's the same way with the mind. It's holding something from a past lifetime that it can't let go of, and it might not even be aware. It's a psychic thing it's holding. See, so the roots for samskaras, then, part 2 of this question, answer to this question, is that you have to go into your past lifetimes to see what it was you held that brought you here. They often say in India, when they look at your body, that is the teachers, this is your karma. They say your body is your prarabdha karma. Just look at your own body. I mean, we had some sort of an idea of that in America back in the 60s, when the hippies were on the scene. Oh, just look in the mirror and you can see yourself. But you're just seeing your face and your eyes, and that could be a doorway. But what you're really seeing is the body as a manifestation of the mind. And if you don't like what your body looks like, then you have to blame your mind, because your mind produced your body. And if you can get that far and accept that much, then you can go back and look at what the mind's like, the contents of the mind. This is the psychic level. This is the subtle body, it's called Sukshma Sharira. They have names for it, which we don't have. We just think of a brain and a body. They're sort of the same thing, which is not a bad way of putting it, actually. They're both physical. But the mind is a whole kingdom of heaven. It's a whole state of consciousness, and it has different levels. And it shifts from vehicle to vehicle, from state to state, from level to level. And if you watch your mind like a Eskimo would watch snow conditions, then you're a survivor. So you learn how to shift, as the Tibetan Buddhists say, when the world shifts. See, everything's shifting and changing. I remember my teacher saying that, says, finite things, because they're changeful, will never satisfy the soul of an awakened man. Then you would think, ironically, and for different reasons, finite things are not going to satisfy the mind of an unawakened soul either. So either way, you're at a loss. Finite things will not satisfy anyone. But for different reasons. You see, the unawakened soul is attached to change as if it were real. The awakened soul knows that it's not real. So one has given up the changeful, and one is still attached to the changeful. But the changeful is nonetheless at the root of all problems. And the mind is constant changes. That's why these samskaras are forming, because it can't come to a changeless position like Brahman. Static, non-dual, unmoving, stable, settled. They can't arrive there and stay there in peace and contentment. There's a goal for you. See, Holy Mother used to say, you need peace of mind first and foremost. So they'll say, well, I can't get enlightenment yet. Let's see if I can get peace. Oh, actually, peace is really hard because of R. See? So I can't get peace yet. Then let's get contentment. Let's see. I can't get contentment either. What's the next default zone back? You see, you have to find where it is that you can land, where your consciousness can land, where it can get some respite, where it can take a break. What would be the next thing back? Your breath. If you can breathe, then you can all of a sudden feel some peace. Most people are like that. So just tell them to breathe. Even a kid, breathe. You just need to breathe. All of a sudden they're very peaceful and settled, you see. It doesn't last long because they're still holding a psychic Kleenex of restlessness. See? So you're going to have to help them let go, or take that bucket of rusty nails, and those are clumps in there of rusty nails. There's not just one of them. And most people, there are many different clumps that they have to work on. Samskara skandhas, they're called. They have nothing like that in Western psychology. No words for that. Collections of samskaras that fuse together like a bunch of rusty nails. So we have to take some metaphor like this and render it into some sort of analogy that helps people understand that the mind has projected all this, and what you see outside is came for what's inside. Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamadachyate. And then it's become two things now, and as it became two things, I only remembered one of them. I forgot the inside from which the outside came. And now I'm just dwelling in the one outside one, and I forget the inside one, and it rusts, it corrodes. So when you try and run energy back to it, or anyone tries to help you, you laugh at them. Say, what do you mean inner life? What do you mean spirituality? What do you mean God? What a joke. This is all I see with my senses. This is good enough for me. So this is a mental posture that binds. It's the name of a chart I want to show you. Now, before we get into the deeper dharmic teachings around this in class 2, and you keep yourself breathing, your posture straight, and so I won't have to do this to you to keep you awake, and to keep yourself on the cutting edge. This is Jagadatri Puja. Say Om Jagadatri.
Om Jagadatri.
Om Jagadatri. So we want to keep her, because she is awareness of the sharpest, purest, freest, stainless steel kind of consistency. We want to keep her foremost in our mind, and then, along with her, these higher ideals that she blesses us with. So, in that way, if you remember, in the same way that last week we looked at this, and we're not going to go through it again, don't worry, but we also looked at the three types of beings in Tantra: animalistic, heroic, and Daiva, divine. Now, I propose for you then this chart next, because we also want to know that there's basically these different kinds of paths, like this three eternal gateways, it's called. Now, I'll call up my copy here, and we'll look at it. There you see actually a beautiful picture I took in India of a fresco that one of the devotees had painted over the ashram, one of Ramakrishna ashrams there, see. And you can see it there over the doorway you walk in. And that's how they want to keep their mind. Even in India, which is in cities, that are polluted and a lot of dust and a lot of craziness and everything, even more so than in a ways than our own Western cities. You want to keep your mind high on this, as if you're walking through this gross world, but the celestial world is always in front of you. You're always seeing higher things, just like looking up and seeing a fresco over a doorway. So there you see, it's the image I used for the three eternal gateways. And also subtitled The Four Veiled Doorways and the Four Fundamental Paths of Life. So this is by way of elucidation for our understanding, and also by way of concession for the problem of falling into rusty paths, into paths that are forested, weeds and undergrowth and so forth. It's like you can't get through the forest, and so people do this by the millions. See, is the thing. So these three eternal gateways are actually, if you can see there, Dharma at Ramakrishna's feet, Adharma and Swadharma. So there are souls that are running along these three pathways, as you might say, as they live and as they die and as they return or not return, Swadharma. So these are the three eternal gateways in which beings are always flowing through, and they're doing it according to their own auspice. It's not done by God or by Mother. It's done by the soul itself, which path it wants to choose. And that's the path of the mind's own free will. It could be a big problem. Depends on how enlightened your will is. If you've become one with the Divine Mother and your will, then you sing Shakale Tomari Icha, O Mother, all happens by thy own divine will, and I'm the chariot and you're the charioteer, and I'm the house and you're the indweller, and I move as you move me. So if you can reach such a high state as that, a mental perspective that you're holding, then Divine Mother is attending upon you all the time, and she's guiding you, just as if you're holding her hand, like you used to do when you were a child in a busy street. Hold your mother's hand. Now you're grown up, and there's a Divine Mother equivalent that you can't see that's holding the hand of the devotee, guiding the boat of the body across the solid earth, as Kabir says in one of his poems. Who is it that guides the solid boat of your body across this earth? It is your Guru, says Kabir. Meditate on her holy feet. So you have this invisible ideal. Funny, talk about Jagadatri Puja, Holy Mother's family worshipping her in Jairomati, in the beautiful village city or town. You also have to think about Holy Mother as a little girl walking around with four goddesses. Remember that story? So Sharadamani, they actually called her Thakurmani, was her name when she was born. Thakurmani, it's like she was going to be Thakurs, see. But then they started calling her Sharadamani, and then Sharda. And so one day a little girl came up to her mother and said, what happened to those four goddesses that used to walk, those four ladies that used to walk around with me all the time? And her mother realized that she had these companions, you see. So Holy Mother, as a young girl, had these 4 goddesses on all sides of her, conducting her around the village, and protecting her. And they eventually disappeared from her sight as she grew up, and went inside, and disappeared into her. Where else would they go? They came from her. They were certainly going to return to her. So this is kind of the idea of the devotees of the Divine Mother, or who have any ishtam of a powerful kind, will be guided by them along this path of Dharma, maybe even to reach the Swadharma. So let's look basically at that first. You can see it can be explained by looking at Adharma's concomitants, let's say. There's the Lokayatika marg. Marg means path. So there's the path of those who are materialists. Sound familiar? Maybe most of the people you knew in the West here as you grew up, possibly even your parents. Although hopefully your parents had, if they were moral and ethical, had a higher thinking process, and were also thinking in terms of a more rich and radiant religious life they had sometimes. But otherwise it was Lokayatika marg. They were following the path of materialism. That's under the adharmic heading. You're not going to get anywhere but back to matter doing that. Krishna says in the Gita, those who revolve in restlessness, rajas, that we're talking about, they revolve all the time. They never go up or down. That is, they never go inward, nor do they fall into tamas. They just, through restlessness, cycle, revolve all the time. That means you'll be born in the womb of the restless, is how he puts it in the Gita. They're born in the womb of the restless souls. And tamasic, slothful people with lots of rust, going to be born in the wombs of slothful beings. And that's, again, almost like saying adharma and dharma. There's 2 different paths there, 2 different gunas prevailing. The next one is mithya-gyan, or fundamentalism. That is a path of just very narrow, and therefore so narrow that it's false knowledge being proposed as. Mithya means false, you see. So it's being proposed as something real. Then there's pravritti marg. Pravritti would be like secularism. And so there's no room for religion in that. And there's just a sort of pragmatism or practicality that's being used to get the finer things of life, if they come via that path. Sometimes they come, but then they also go. And there's Bahutva marg. That's called religious convention. So we'd have to put that under the adharmic heading. If you follow religious convention that doesn't get you anywhere, then you're just going from heaven to earth to hell. And as far as that is concerned, those are the 3 lower chakras of Kundalini Yoga. They're also the 3 lower worlds of the 7 potential worlds. Bhurvasvaha, earth, lower heaven, and higher heaven. And so this is a cyclic. Lord Buddha said this is a cyclic kind of living. You see, where you're being born again and again in bodies in different levels of consciousness, but restricted just to conventional means. So mundane human convention has been one of the ways in which our founder, Lex Hixon, a phrase which he coined to let us know about this whole plethora of people who are following this one path of conventionalism and not able to break out of it. Let's quote out of the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam here. This is very interesting to find in an ancient scripture a description of our age, Kali Yuga. I was very happy to find it. Quote, "In an age of darkness, viciousness and vile acts become the normal mode of behavior. Even the gods become deceitful. What to speak of humans and lower creatures? It is natural that injury come to those who injure others. But when peaceful persons, devoid of enmity, are injured, that is an act of wickedness, pure and simple. In such an age, one will find very few persons following the true religion." So here's 4 ways in which people follow a kind of path which has nothing to do with true religion, nothing to do with Dharma. Now let's look at Lord Vashishtha's way of saying this in the quote next to it. That was from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, so that was Divine Mother's description of the Kali Yuga that we just quoted, age of darkness, where vile acts become the natural mode of behavior, quite often covered as if you're doing good to people, but it's actually not good for them at all, like commercialism and environmental pollution and so forth, things that are seeming to be good for people, but they end up with these bad effects, and all under the deceitful eye of people who want to make profit and gain the only meaning for life. That kind of viciousness. Lord Vashishtha says about it, that intrepid spiritual wayfarer who inquires into the wise characteristics of Dharma, he treads the proper path. He learns concentration and meditation, the significance of the scriptures, discrimination between the real and the unreal, and knows what actions are to be done and which are to be not to be done. Oh, Lord Vashishtha describing then the dharmic person. So side by side here, beings who are attracted to these 4 paths, or one of them, or maybe an admixture of them, and a person who is following the Dharma, heading toward their Swadharma. It's not rocket science, as we say. It's this clear and simple way in which Vedanta would explain this. Now, if you go down to, those were the 4 veiled doorways, right? Now let's look at the 4 fundamental paths of life. They are Vyavaharika, Advaita, Yoga, and Advaita. They're strewn across the bottom of this chart here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, Vyavaharika is, of course, the worldly path. It's following directly under the Dharma. It's a quote there by Shankara. He says, meditation on the meaning of truth as it is taught in the Vedanta leads to the highest illumination. By this means, the misery of worldly life, Vyavaharika, is destroyed altogether. So, of course, whenever I hear the word Vyavaharika, I think of my Swami, my teacher, Swami Shishanandaji. So he would say that, when he would say, you're following the Bhoga Marga in the West, that's the path of pleasure. That won't get you anywhere. You have to follow the Jnana Marga, path of wisdom. And he says, so it's Vyavaharika, he would say. It's this path of worldly life leading to suffering, instead of Paramartika, which is the supreme path leading to illumination. So life should be lived in such a way that it conduces to your freedom in the end. The 4-fold path of Mother is basically Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So you can have wealth and you can have satisfaction of your desires if you do everything in the Dharma, and it'll end up in freedom. So in this way, you want to be very careful then of the rust of these paths. Is that the whole path has become corroded. Yet people are flowing along it all the time, and they're becoming polluted. Their souls and minds are becoming polluted by contact with it. And it's not rocket science, as I just said. It's easy to see how people have fallen into this and fallen out of simple divine remembrance of the truth. Like we sang last week, even we sang Om Shtapakaya Cha Dharmasya Sarva Dharma Swarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishna Te Namaha Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. So, Om Shtapakaya Cha Dharmasya. Salutations to that one who is steady, Stapakaya, in the Dharma, in the highest Dharma. Sarva Dharma Swarupine is also the father of all the Dharmas. He was the establisher and stayed steady in all the dharmas. Avatar Varashtaya, he represents the best of all the avatars that have come to earth. Ramakrishnaya te namaha, we bow, salute thee. Who else shall we salute in this world, in this old world? Who else should we salute but a great soul like that? And not just came and said some beautiful things about one dharma or one path, but established all paths as valid ways to reach the truth, and stayed steady in them as he did so, practiced them all. We have never seen that before. And therefore we proclaim him to be the greatest of all avatars, of the same consistency of Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, who have come from time out of mind through yugas, and now here with us today in the Kali Yuga, in an age where vile and vicious acts have become the normal behavior. So who else should we turn to, particularly in an age like this? Sometimes we would sing it like this. Sarvana Shedare Ashi Dharma Dharma Duto Keli Sharananda Marikai Mohakalar Namohini Sharananda Marikai Mohakalar Sarvanashi Dare Ashi Dharma Adharma Duto Keli. You've taken us beyond Adharma and Dharma to the Swadharma. Dharma Adharma, you've gone beyond both of them. And therefore, Mother Kali, I pay my obeisances to thee. The author of this song, Kamalakanta, says with a restless mind, you put to death virtue and sin alike, Dharma and Adharma, with your flashing sword of wisdom. So a beautiful Bengali hymn or bhajan that we sing. And then goes on to say, oh, you've even bewitched the mind of Lord Shiva. Sadanandamayi Kali, Mohakala Manomohini, Mahakala, you've even bewitched the mind of Shiva. So in any way you sing it in a stotram or in a bhajan, you'll find that this Dharma is foremost on the minds of souls who are embodied, because they've not come here to have fun, and they've not come here to just forbear suffering. They've come here to reach the highest goal. And if they can do it here on earth through the physical body, they can do it anywhere in any world, because this is the densest place, especially in an age of viciousness and vileness, where that seems to be the norm for most people. They will do unthinking acts without the least consideration. See? To expect wicked men not to do wicked acts is insanity. So those are naive people. To expect wicked men not to do wicked acts is insanity. So this is their nature. So they're following these paths. Fundamentalism, secularism, materialism. And when they do encounter religion, they'll go to war with other religions. They'll try and use religion as an excuse that God's on their side to try and get the goods and riches of other countries. When I moved into a house I just had to move to, after 17 years I had to move, so I moved into a house and there was an American flag hanging out in front of it. It was for rent. So I took that down immediately. And one of my students has made this beautiful all nations flag. So I wrote to him and said, can I have one of those? And I want to hang that up in the place where it was. So send it to me, and we've got it hanging now outside the retreat center up there, and with all the little flags of every country in the world there included on that. And so that's an idea of universality, even here in the world, culturally. You know, it's a higher ideal to hold, but I'm not so naive as to think that it's going to work. I'm not hanging it up there because I have any hopes for the world. I don't have any hope for the world whatsoever or for people, because there are too many of them following these paths. But the more people we can convince of the Dharma and its efficacy, and maybe even a few of them reach the Swadharma and get full enlightenment, that's going to shift the emphasis of positivity and human betterment. See? It says, so my teacher used to say that, it said, the scientist's art should not play into the hands of the politicians. The scientist's art should not play into the hands of the politicians. It should always be kept for the betterment of human society. So that's bad influence. And so you can see that even people following a religious convention could get influenced by materialists, see, or by secularists. And then all of a sudden you've got atom splitting and atom bombs and people dying and countries warring with one another. That's the world. We can't sit around and bitch and complain about it, as my brother used to say, piss and moan about it. But we can't really do something about it because it's never going to change. So what we can do is focus the mind on the Dharma and share that with our children, raise our children in it, so that more and more people, there's more and more of an impetus towards actual positive change for the betterment of human society, and more Dharma to consider, more people to consider it. Win some souls over for that. And it wouldn't be necessarily just in the old missionary style of Buddhism and Christianity. It's going to have to be with this new dispensation. The new dispensation of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So I just sang that. Om Shtapakaya Cha Dharmasha. Someone who came here with a message not just of one religion or not just for one culture. Like, say, Shankara for India, see, but for all beings, for all beings and for all souls to have a chance. Holy Mother used to say that Sri Ramakrishna has come and now all beings can get enlightenment. The path is wide open. So that's, if there's any real good news then, that would be what we would have to list as the good news. All souls can get enlightenment and free from the fetters of adharma. So one other quote here, and I think although Vyavaharika is the worldly path, then you could say path of dualism is rich in India. That is, God and I are separate, but I love God. But if you're over here in secularism and so forth to say there is no God, there's no God and I'm not God either. So you have no higher ideal. You just have the ego in matter, basically. They say we love God and we pray to God, but they don't love God. They're not praying to God. They love the ego and they're praying to the ego. That's what my teacher used to say. And he saw it very clearly, teaching the Westerners. They have a sort of foggy idea of what God is as a concept in their mind, but the ego is still in charge. He used to say, you Westerners, you pray to God, but you keep the powder keg dry. See? So you pray to God, oh, may I be safe from my enemies, and may I win victories and so forth, and I'll put it all in your hands. Well, actually, no, I'll keep the powder keg dry just in case you're not there, you see. And I can use power, the ego's power, you see, split the atom and wreak havoc on people, dominate over them. And India is known, that's one of the 8 occult powers since time out of mind, domination over others. It's the ego's pastime, favorite pastime. So you have to not just look in the past and say, oh, that's an occult power from a long time ago. Look at how it's manifested in the world now. It's one of the main pathways. It's one of the veiled doorways. And it certainly shows itself up. But when you get to a teaching like the 4 fundamental paths of life, then it puts it in a little bit more concessionary way. You know, it's basically you can follow a worldly path, but you can also adhere to Advaita. God exists, and I'm the devotee. And that's a very rich and beautiful path. Even not just in India, in Christianity and Judaism and Sufism and so forth, the idea of dualism is still there, but it's that there are 2 separate realities. Well, maybe that's not what the non-dualist would like to end up with. I and my Father are one. Even Jesus said that. But it is nevertheless a path which is far superior to any of these mentioned before, because you've now let divinity into the picture. Maybe one of these days you'll even find out that that divinity is within you, and that would be called Vishishta Advaita. Dvaita, Vishishta Advaita, and then Advaita. But you might say that on the way from I'm the vine, you're the branches, to I and my Father are one, there's this path called yoga, or the path of transformation. Again, if you're a non-dualist, you don't like the idea of transformation, parinama. You say, well, no, aparinama. Brahman doesn't transform. There's no change in Brahman. It's pure and perfect. So how can there be transformation? So you're going to have to take this aid, you see, this philosophical aid called qualified non-dualism, and use it to get to this higher position. So you're going to have to allow for the fact that the mind needs transforming, but the Atman is fine. It'd be sort of like saying, they ask, how are you? I'm fine, I'm well, always. You're speaking from the standpoint of the Atman. But then they ask you another day, how are you doing? I'm not so well, I have a cough, I'm sick, I've got cancer. See? So that you're speaking from the standpoint of the body. So what standpoint are you speaking from? Philosophically becomes very important. So to know about the three eternal gateways, the four veiled doorways, and the four fundamental paths of life helps us in finding out what's rusty and where rust can be destroyed. How can it be destroyed? As you say what, where, when, why, you're talking about this. And when you say how, you're talking about this. And when you say who, you're talking about this. Who am I? I am that. But when you say how can I do it? You're talking about yoga as practice. And that's a universal path. People are doing yoga in all religions. It's probably the best word to use for it, rather than say religion. I'm doing yoga. And my yoga is not just physical, thank you very much. It's also on the inner levels. My mind has got to be in yoga. That's where I fell out of yoga, when the mind became rusty, corroded, and ineffective to the task. So one other quote down here from Paramashiva in the Yoga Vashishta scripture. He says, the true renouncer, called the great actor and the great enjoyer, has transcended both dharma and adharma and gotten free from birth and death. So there, we have a good lesson from Lord Shiva about what Swadharma is. See, it connects by the arrow straight down to this non-dual path of Advaita Vedanta. Straight down. So you see that he says very nicely, beyond dharma and adharma is, as it were, Swadharma. And a person living there, according to Lord Vashishta, can be called the great renouncer, the great actor, and the great enjoyer. Because they can act in the world without accruing karma, and they can enjoy everything with exquisite enjoyment. That's how Swami Vivekananda put it. People don't, they just fall into mundane enjoyments, see. But there's such a thing as exquisite enjoyment, where everything becomes that way. So that's the great enjoyer. He knows the world's unreal, yet he can still act in it, can still enjoy it in a very transcendental and pure way. That's one of Lord Vashishta's signature teachings. So then we see concessionary. This is leading us up to 3 more classes on sadhana. We have to know there are 3 kinds of beings that we're talking about: pasu, animalistic; virya, heroic; and daiva, divine. We have to know that there are these basic 3 eternal gateways, and there are 4 fundamental paths of life, and there are 4 veiled doorways. If, as a consummate aspirant and devotee of the Lord and Mother of the Universe, you know these things, then you have a much better idea of how rust accumulates, where is its favorite hiding place, and how to do away with it in yourself and in others. Dharma would be the best rust-destroying thing of all, or sadhana, as the name of this class series. Sadhana, the dissolver of the rust of households. Speaking basically from that aspect of Lord Buddha's teachings, because most of us are householders in this country, in this day and age. Very few monks here. In India, non-recitation of scriptures would be the rust of monasteries. So Ramakrishna order, no rust there. I know personally by visiting the monks and sometimes being their guest in the morning at their classes and so forth, that they recite hours every day of the scriptures, every day of their life. Every day without fail. It's a part of their routine. And it's at 4 or 5 in the morning, after they meditated for an hour. A place called Advaita Ashrama I visit in Calcutta, and in Himalayas is like that. So this isn't just, oh, let's do this once a week. See, or let's just do it because it's good for us. This is what to do, to keep the rust of ages away. To keep, not only keep viciousness and vileness away, but to actually make ourselves and cut ourselves in the image of God. Shining examples of what, in the Kali Yuga, of what God should be like, and representatives of our great master, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Very important, all these things. And also children of the mother. We don't want to represent mother in any other way than the best possible, do we? So this is the responsibility of freedom. Freedom comes with responsibility. You've probably heard that. So that's what we mean when we say that. There's another way of looking at this that's very good. So it was fun for me to colorize this chart yesterday, because I thought it would be good to add into this class series. We know this beautiful chant which we say every day, Om Asato Ma Sadgamoya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamoya, Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya. That's lead us from lower truth to higher truth, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord, with thy sweet and benign presence. That's a beautiful chant that many of us have memorized and know about. And there you see Swami Vivekananda doing exactly what we just said, sharing the Dharma with other people in this beautiful illustration. So there in India, people from different religions, you can see them wearing different turbans and different wear, different cloths. So they're all coming to hear this universal message of Swami Vivekananda that comes straight from the heart and mind of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He was the best example. Talk about a soul who was 100% present in the Dharma and in the Swadharma all the time. People talked about him that way. And so we know from many good accounts that he was precisely what he's made up to be in books and by descriptions, by people who actually saw him. Well, this lead us from lower truth to higher truth then was something I had to make into a chart. And so I had to think how people rise from lower truth to higher truth, because when Vivekananda came here, they were evidently, from what I heard, they were in 1890s, there were a few people who were interpreting that Asato Ma Sad Kamoya chant as lead us from falseness to truth. And he said, oh no, nothing's all false. So he said, basically, there are things that are more false than other things, and things that you can't philosophically hang your hat on or shouldn't, you see. But he said, it's always from lower truth to higher truth. There's always some truth in everything. And we know that they describe even Maya, the flummoxing Maya, the world bewitching Maya, as she who holds one of her hands over your eyes and leads you on with the other hand. So even Maya, even TR and S, the gunas, have this way of leading one out if one can look for the revelatory power. Because other words for tamas, rajas, and sattva are avarana shakti, vikshepa shakti, and prakasha shakti. Prakasha shakti is the revelatory power, so it leads one up and out of mitjikyan. See, that's what we start with here. And we also saw that it was one of these paths here, right? Mitjikyan marga. So here it says, actions which are mindless, deluded, violent, harmful, spiteful, hateful, jealous, and evil, If we're looking at it from the standpoint of something to rise above, then there are people who are following the worldly path who actually practice evil. And they're spiteful and they're hateful. And they can even smile at you and be spiteful and hateful. Swami Vivekananda called that the world of fair faces and false hearts. That they would look at you with a smile, but behind the smile is this intention to do you harm. Or to be against your highest good, however you want to put that. To be in your way all the time. So these paths are a bit generalized, but you can see that if you look into instances in your life and the lives of others, that they have direct parallels to that kind of behavior. So it's usually you hear viciousness and violence, you think about acts of outright killing and murder and wantonness, but those are at least what they seem to be. There's no hiding those, you see. But this other kind of deceitfulness is being described here is a kind of way of veiling it with these paths that you walk. So it gives you an excuse to do these things, to the environment, to people, to other countries, and you can feel fine about it all the time you're doing it. It's a very deep-grained problem in human nature. It's why some people are pasu and other people are virya. You know what I mean by that. Some still have animalistic tendencies and they can't help it. When we propose veiled pathways and so forth, we're talking about these are people who, due to the samskaras in their minds, are running along these paths heedless and helpless. 2 H's. I'll think of another H here soon. Heedless and helpless. See? They can't help themselves. Like animals can't help themselves. Tigers kill. So, I mean, we just heard about a couple kids who burnt down a forest with fireworks. It's on the mainland this summer. Playing with some fireworks and the whole forest goes up, you see. Horrible. Thousands of trees died, hundreds of animals, insects, people died, not to speak of those others. So, a bolt of lightning did the same thing a few weeks later to a whole area. So, do you blame the kid or you blame the lightning? These are things that happen in Maya, and they're going to keep on happening. And you have basically one protection, is to protect yourself with the Dharma, because morality and ethics aren't going to help. Neither are your court and justice systems going to help, and I can certainly tell you your prison systems aren't going to help unless they change their attitude about things. Your hospitals aren't going to help. My teacher used to say, oh, they say they love God. All of you say you love God, you know. But then the teacher comes and says, okay, I'll show you how to love God. And, no, I'm going to wait till God comes to me. God has to come to me. And then he'd say, yes, but will God come into your football field? Will God come into your TV? Will God come into your bowling alley? See? So they'll put off these things as far as they can, arm's length, out of sight, out of mind, the very things that will help them. And they'll do that for lifetimes, and they'll become samskaras, collective samskaras in the mind of the heaven seekers, collective samskaras in the mind of the worldly people, and collective samskaras in the minds of the evil who want to dominate and wreak havoc and war in their next lifetime. They're set for it. You can't be naive about this, and you can't be judgmental about it. You just have to get free of it. Have to have higher sense, deeper intellect, because you're not going to stop it. There's a wave of violence coming all the time, and we see that more and more with terrorism now. But there's also a wave of bliss that's constantly coming. The name of Ramakrishna is a wave of bliss. Sharada Ramakrishna Name Bande Keche Rebai. Sharada Ramakrishna Name Bande Keche Rebai. There's this wave of bliss of Ramakrishna and Sharda's name coming. Can't you hear that sound, that wave, the sound of that wave coming? So immerse yourself in that for protection and for freedom. And so higher qualities will come from that. This wasn't a sidetrack, this was an explanation of things that I'm trying to pull together here in connections. But let's go on to these higher things coming. If you're at the level of Michigyan, this is avidya. Avidya means lack of vidya. Vidya means knowledge. So you don't have any knowledge yet to speak of. Avidya, you actually have ignorance. 5 kleshas in yoga. What's the first one? Avidya. What does it mean? Lack of knowledge of my true nature. Doesn't mean lack of knowledge of facts and figures, history, schooling, secular things, you see. It means I don't even remember my true self anymore. I think my ego is myself. I think my body is myself. So that's how deep the ignorance has gotten. So that's avidya. You see this graph up here goes from avidya to aparavidya, lower knowledge. Then it goes to paravidya, higher knowledge, and it finally ends up in parama Advaita. That is the supreme state that's beyond dharma and undharma and beyond knowledge and ignorance. It's even beyond wisdom. It's beyond scriptures. So this is a graph you follow, and this is how people react inside of each levels of this graph. If you're there stuck in avidya, basically you're using knowledge merely for purposes of making a living. That's a problem. And you can point it back here to the path of worldliness and materialism. The only reason you learn anything is to make a living. That's how they orient you. And it's good if you learn something to make a living. We're not saying that. But if that's the only reason you're doing it, that's where you begin to run afoul. And the rest begins to infill these channels towards what's beyond karma. What's beyond dharma, adharma. Then intellectualism for pleasure seeking and power. So you build a sort of intellectual sheath full of knowledge, secular knowledge, and you're using that for power, as we just said. Scholarship to gain fame out of ambition. So these are the higher runs of these veiled pathways, aren't they? That people still know nothing about themselves. They're trying to get money for fame and also for pleasure, to lead a worldly life. So that kind of scholarship and intellectualism, Sri Ramakrishna said, I spit on that. You must go beyond those kinds of things and outside of mere book learning and get to direct spiritual experience. Ooh, boy, that's way up here. Zip all the way to the top. The acquisition of direct spiritual experience would be the ultimate thing, you see, on this path to higher wisdom. But let's not jump too soon. Then aparavidya is there. This was all done in just pretty much rank ignorance, see, of anything higher. Aparavidya is called lower knowledge, so you're beginning to get some idea. That's why you find words appearing there like altruism and so forth. So here's preoccupation with facts and figures at a rather low level. Gathering of information for ego gratification, because then you can impress your friends. Oh, I know something about that. Here, let me tell you about that. See, I'm wise and so forth. So you begin talking and talking. Secular subjects gained for conventional means. That's rather like this conventional religious path, isn't it? It's pretty soon you have just conventional knowledge, and that alone you remain content with. Then at the middle of this, it starts to get a little bit refined. Knowledge utilized for altruistic motives. All of a sudden, what would you call that as compared to the rest of this? Virya, heroism. See? Here's all pasu, animalism. See, this is why people are still in their lower nature. And they might do acts of good and bad stultification. See, that is acts that bind and acts that are good but for the wrong purposes and so forth. So here you have knowledge utilized for altruistic motives, about there you have the first glimmerings of virya coming about, heroism. You have some thoughts for other beings. It's a good thing. And it gets better. About that time you'll find people, and this is through my own experience, reading spiritual books. Hey, I just read a beautiful book, you see. I'll share this with you. So they're altruistic, they want to share it with you, but they've just found something very precious to them. So in this day and age, in the Kali Yuga, in the Western cultures, in America, reading spiritual books is a sign of higher life. It's certainly not going to take us to distance, but it's a sign that we see in people. And I think that becomes better when it becomes scriptures. Not just spiritual books like autobiographies and things like that, maybe about personalities or whatever, but basically all of a sudden you find these scriptures with the meat of spiritual realization in them by hosts of souls that have realized the goal in their life thousands of years ago, and that now you're treading that same path, or retreading it. So read spiritual books for edification, then studies the scriptures under a spiritual teacher. Of course, that would be hopeful on a part of a chart like this. We hope that you'll read spiritual books, then it'll make you find a teacher. Because your ego is still unripe, there's still a little animalism in you, and some heroism mixed, you see. So now you're going to read those spiritual books and think you understand everything, and that's going to be enough for you. But edification has different levels. Knowledge has a lot way more to share with you, and you're still at the level of a paravidya, lower knowledge, book learning. So we just said, Sri Ramakrishna said, you must go beyond book learning. So what would happen then? Find a teacher, then what? Teach spiritual disciplines to sincere aspirants. You'd cut your teeth on what the teacher told you, and then you'd share those teachings with others, as Sri Ram says. Then Paravidya comes next. As we end the half of our class, we'll break here in a few minutes, but we'll have just enough time to finish this up. That is, transmitting the teachings to help free or liberate. So your heroism just took a higher turn. Now you actually have a strong desire that all beings get free. You want to work for the highest good of all sentient beings, for the enlightenment of all sentient beings, as they said. So that's your highest aspiration right now. And as this happens, worship of the deities in a non-dual state of mind. I think that's very well put. You can worship the deities, and so that would be good. But if you worship the deities in a non-dual state of mind, that would be better. So in other words, there's the deity, I'm offering flowers, incense, and candles, and I'm offering it to myself. Basically, that's what's happening. You have an outer altar, and what's here is there. In fact, that has come out of this. That's the mudra for it. Out of my heart has come this altar. It's a manifestation of my love for God, which is my own self. So now I'm bowing and worshiping my own self. I am the darling of my own worship. There's a quote in the Tantras that says that. When a man truly worships, he becomes the darling of his own worship. So God and he are not separate anymore. They're one and the same. They never were separate. Now, about time I realized that, and got down to that kind of non-dual worship, where the deities are no more somewhere out in the sky, somewhere in space, or are they floating somewhere in some other world that I don't know where it is. They're actually within me. They're mine. They're my thoughts. And the energy that leads to them is also mine. And it's up to me whether I want to keep the avenues rust-free, corrosion-free, so that I can actually see that they're mine. Watching J. Krishnamurti lately, got seduced into seeing a few of his YouTubes by looking at YouTubes from SRV is offered up instead. It's just wonderful how in his older age, how he progressed, or how he matured. In his younger age, I've found a bit too argumentative and not so flexible, but he's wonderful to watch. as a fully matured Jnani, and maybe even beyond Jnani, a Vijnani. So kind of soul that Vivekananda probably would have loved to see, coming to that kind of non-dual realization in any given lifetime. So I'm reminded of him when we talk about this level of things, because he would sit and he would say to the Hindus in front of him, maybe hundreds of Hindus, he'd say, "You've got millions of gods here. What's wrong with you? See, you're all going to these different temples and worshiping these millions of gods, but there is no gods. There's just you. You're the god." So he's like, the Hindus are sitting there kind of looking at him with kind of blank faces, see. So fine that there are millions of gods, but these are the deities that have come out of you. If you don't have the connection with them, then some huge bucket of rust has gotten in between you and your ancestors, and between the ancestors and the celestials, and between the celestials and the gods and goddesses, and between them and the Trinity. And you're not going to be able to break through those things. Brahma Granti, Rudra Granti, Vishnu Granti, Rudra Granti, these huge knots or membranes, psychic membranes, scar tissue, rust that's built up between the lower worlds, the middle worlds, and the higher worlds, if you want to put it. So to penetrate through this is going to be very difficult, especially for a culture or a race, but even for an individual. So worship the deities in a non-dual state of mind brings out everything I want to say, really, about what people are doing today with deity yoga, with vipassana and upasana, and the things that they're entertaining in the West, with Tibetan Buddhism coming over and Zen Buddhism before that. It's very interesting, you see, and then Vedanta now. What is it that's really coming up for us to look at in the looking glasses of these various darshanas of India? So that would be a good way of saying it. It's not that, I want to worship God with form and I don't know anything about formlessness, or I want to jump to formlessness and I'm going to cast the gods and the ancestors away. No, it's that God exists in both of those, and all of those exist in you. So find them there. Kings of heaven are within you. Go take a look. Explore some of the chambers of the Father's mansion. But if there's corrosion and rust along the path, then you're going to have to get out some sandpaper or some salt solution and smooth that away so you can pass. The next is compassionate use of wisdom to remove suffering. That's Holy Mother's path to me, one of her hidden paths. And they call that Jnanodaya Yoga. Jnanodaya Yoga. That is, using wisdom as the highest compassion. Not using food to help the starving, not using medicines to help the sick, not using sadhana to help the weak, using wisdom as the highest compassion, and waking them up to their own true self. Because it all started off with avidya, didn't it? And there you were under the influence of false, mityagan. You were believing in the son of a barren woman, and idiotic things like that, you see. So avidya is lack of knowledge of your true self. So then all of a sudden you remember the true self, that's what you need. So the greatest compassion, and Krishna states it at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, is that my most beloved devotee is that who shares the Dharmic wisdom with others, impresses them upon it. Sri Ramakrishna called that the superior doctor, not the mediocre doctor or the inferior doctor. The superior doctor that pursues you and says, listen to this, analyze this, contemplate this, meditate on this, realize this, and be free in this lifetime. The sooner the better, because then you can share it with everyone else. All your desires for altruism and for helping sentient beings reach the highest goal fulfilled for you. And you can come back 14 times more to do that if you want. For a country like Tibet, you know what I mean? Or come back every 700 years, 1,000 years, like Swami Vivekananda. Check in, see how they're doing. Did they understand me when I spoke to them last time? Did they take the Dharma, reflect on it, contemplate it, meditate it, realize it, work it back into their lives? If not, then, see, where's the rust? Show me the rust bucket and I've got a hammer for you. A hammer and some salt solution. I've got them right here. That's what these great souls bring. All right, so combining devotion and wisdom and meditation would be the penultimate step. You're at the level of Paravidya, remember? So, two wings of the bird, bhakti and jnanam, come available to you. And finally, the acquisition of direct spiritual experience. Now, before we break, look up the left-hand side of the chart. Mithya Gyan turned to Agyan. Agyan turned to Gyan. Gyan turned to Vigyan. And that turned to Brahma Gyan. So, from lower truth to higher truth, it rather proceeds like that. If you're an inward-moving yogi or yogini. Inward-moving. Just enough to say that Jnana had its two components. Pravritti Gyan and Nivritti Gyan. See, more towards the world and more towards renunciation. Basically is what you'd say. Nivritti, to renounce. To transcend. So, I will leave us there for the break. We'll read this last chart to kick us into the second half. Take 15 minutes off and come back and see where else we can find rust and how we can remove it. Om Hari Om. We have returned with all of you. I know there are people watching from around the world, not hosts and hosts of them, but a few individuals in various countries, which goes very well with the universal nature of what Vedanta explains to us by way of the Dharma, and also with the great Ishtam, Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and Swami Vivekananda, and all the direct disciples and the lay disciples that gathered around him, and the 5 million or so of his family that are growing all the time by leaps and bounds, in a very short time too, with many, many beautiful songs and scriptures, and there's even a Ramakrishna Upanishad out now that's been composed. So even in, almost in his very lifetime, people were finding out about a great light like that, like a steamship that went across the ocean, leaving a wake, sometimes it's described that. Or a band of musicians who blew into town out of nowhere and played the most wonderful music. All the people listening ran to tell their friends, you see, and when they came back, the musicians were gone and packed up and went to the next village. That's how Sri Ramakrishna talked about beings like Buddha and his Noble Eight, and Shankara and his 18 or 20 disciples, and Christ and his 12 apostles, and now Sri Ramakrishna and his 16 disciples. It's like a band of musicians playing the most beautiful music of the age. But you have to be there when they show up. If you have this rust along your path, then you're not going to be there, or if you even get lucky and you are there, you're not going to be able to see. We were talking about that as far as grace and self-effort. Quoted Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj last week when he said, Buddhism thinks in terms of self-effort, Christianity thinks in terms of grace, but Sri Ramakrishna thought in terms of both, self-effort and grace. So you're not going to recognize grace when it comes unless you purify the mind through self-effort. And so you might say that's why another way of saying that in the Western way of speaking was sun shines on saint and sinner alike. So sinners are getting beautiful experiences, saints are getting horrible experiences. So it's more a matter of grace and self-effort. If you remove the tarnish or the corrosion or the rust from your mind and your prana, your energy, so that it can flow, then when grace happens to you, you'll know that it's grace. And that's a great advantage to that, as to not knowing, like blind faith or something like that. It's a start, but it's not the full exquisite pleasure, which is bliss, which happens to people when they're on hand, as we just say, like Swami Vivekananda being completely present. He was a Vijnani, and that's how Sri Ramakrishna says here, to put a capper on this whole path of lower truth to higher truth, asato ma satkamaya. We took 40 minutes or so to flesh out that saying that we've memorized, asato ma satkamaya, as it was there as a famous chant even when Vivekananda was there in 1893. He had to change the meaning from lower truth to higher truth, because they were saying from falsehood to truth. So there is a kind of falsehood that goes on, but you might say, like the teaching of the Buddha, the reflection of the moon in the lake, people think it's the real moon. And then it isn't when they touch it. It distorts. So that's false. But that false teaching will cause you to look up towards the real moon and figure it out. So anything that has an appearance in Maya like that has a hidden quality behind it that Mother is trying to explain to you through this hidden quality, even in the terms of things that are mithya, false or unreal. So we go from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, from the illusion of death to eternal life. Death would seem real, right? But if you find out it's an illusion, you think this way for a whole lifetime, you have a conscious death, and then the next lifetimes, if you do come back, are conscious ones. And death never frightens you anymore. There are songs I could sing you about that. So those are compositions that are the property of the minds of these luminaries from lifetime to lifetime. They come back remembering these. Sort of like you might come back and remember Beethoven's Fourth or something, or Fifth. Da, 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 you know. That would kind of stick to your mind in sort of samskara. So if you heard that in another lifetime, oh, that's beautiful, it sounds so familiar. Because you have European lifetimes in which you heard that. How many? You could have quite a few. So in the same way with spiritual teachings, you'll respond and recognize and remember and even react to various things that come upon you in this march from lower truth to higher truth. So Ramakrishna puts a cap on this teaching all the way from Mityagan to Brahmagyan, if you want to put it that way, by saying, an agyani does not know that there is fire potential in wood. A jnani knows this, but cannot bring it out. The vijnani possessed of Brahmagyan not only knows that fire is potential in wood, but gathers it up, strikes the flame, cooks the food, and feeds others. So he knew the difference between agyanis, gyanis, and vijnanis. So a jnani is a very great soul, has realization of knowledge of Divine Mother, of Mother Wisdom, and so forth, but not necessarily can bring it out and teach it to others yet. So they might be very good in their own right or on their own auspice, but to bring it out and share it in a way that helps transform people, transform minds, is not maybe given to that level of wisdom knower yet. But a vijnani has all those powers. And so Vivekananda, being a Nitya Siddha, is another, being Nitya Siddha, I should say, is another example of Sri Ramakrishna, of a great expression of how there are perfected souls out there who, when they enter the body, they don't have anything to gain. Like Sri Krishna says in the Gita, I have nothing to gain here anymore, Arjuna. I just come back for the good of the people. Loka sangraha. I come back for the highest good of beings. So he blends a heroic kind of nature, his willingness to come back, with this highest knower of Brahman. A beautiful combination there. But a jnani wouldn't necessarily do that. A jnani might say, might be a rat leaving a sinking ship, you see, or every man for himself, you see. So save yourself is a good thing to do, no doubt. And then, of course, that rust will not maybe return again in your life. So this is a final quote that puts a capper on this teaching that's beginning to lead us towards sadhana, isn't it? Which is the name of this series, Sadhana, Dissolving the Rust of Spiritual Life. So we've now sort of, to summarize in 1.5 class, that we've been giving concessions to the worldly paths. We've been giving voice to the fact that there are devotees who are not fully refined yet, and that there are worldly people, and that there are evil people too, demoniacal. There are divine and there are demoniacal. You know where that saying comes from. Daiva Sura Sampat Yoga in the Gita. That's the chapter where Krishna elucidates for Arjuna that there are divine beings here and there are demoniacal beings here. Asuras and Rakshasas as opposed to compared to these rishis and so forth. So he is not pulling any punches with that, nor is he being naive or allowing Arjuna to rest in any sort of sense of unsurety or uncertainty around that. So, Daiva Sampat, so the presence of divine beings then will be what the person who's using this path of Asato Sadgamaya, from darkness to light, from the illusion of death to birth to eternal life, and even rebirth in full wisdom, they would be using those kinds of teachings. So I wanted to show you then, before we go on towards the highest benefits of sadhana, which we will get to in classes 4 and 5, no doubt, we still have to give an eye to this problem of rust. And we've done it in those ways, to show that there are some veiled pathways, there are some beings who are not so refined in their intelligence or their consciousness yet. The Patita Pavana soul, the soul who's there for the fallen and the lowly, has an eye towards them too. And Krishna does say, be indifferent to the evil. So you have to be very careful about working in the periphery or in the atmosphere of those kinds of beings. That kind of indifference will be very helpful to you, keep you from that kind of naivety which could do you harm. But to put an eye on where rust collects then is a very important thing. So I wanted to show you this chart called Postures That Bind, or mental perspectives that stymie personality, because it's working its way towards the teaching of samskara, which we had in this bucket of rusty nails chart. Samskaras, we want to look into them very deeply as the source of this corrosion of consciousness over human consciousness. And as I was saying in the first half of the class, a 2-point answer to that. First, there are samskaras in this lifetime that you're forming. And if you've come to be warned about them and you're doing meditation, for instance, and studying the scriptures and doing puja and so forth, those samskaras will melt away right away. You know that quote I sometimes recite about Pramadina nasandeha kim karishyami vrittiman utpatyante vilyante buddhischa yata jale. That is how to dissolve the bubbles that rise every day in your mind. Because ignorance is not real, but you think it's real. So doubt is not real either, and you think it's real. So by entertaining the fact that it's real, they're always there in your mind, and those are the beginnings of a samskara starting to form in your mind. Because pretty soon you'll be fearful, or you'll be doubtful about everything. You might have tarkika buddhi creep in. Tarkika buddhi means argumentative about everything. So you find people like that. You can't say anything, even an obvious dharmic truth, pure and clean to them without them arguing about it or something, or taking up some objective. So samskaras form in all these different ways on all these various levels in people, in their minds. So the mind-only schools and the transformation of mind schools, since the Atman is pure and perfect, they realize the mind is the next station along the way from the Atman to the body. If you want to just put it in Triputis again, it's Atman, mind, body. So how people come into the predicaments that they're in, karmically speaking, has to do with samskaras. And samskaras are being fed by karmas, and then formed by karmas, and then living in that samskara in the next lifetime causes you to do acts that form more karma. See? So it's this cycle of birth and death. It's described very nice by Lord Buddha, Kala Chakra, or Samsara Pragbara, even thousands of years before Lord Buddha, in Lord Kapula's way of speaking about it, the father of Samkhya Yoga. So they've known about this from time out of mind, and keep it, and therefore so should we. We should know where these rusts form, how this corrosion comes upon us, and upon other people in our race, in our culture, and in our families, and with our friends. And we should know about this, and not only to protect ourselves from it, because we may have tools given to us as we do work our way into deeper levels of sadhana and realization that we can use to help beings. If we really want to help them, and that's what we have to keep an eye to. So you see here, this chart is a further deeper look into that. So I've put up here about mental postures, which are very much like samskaras. To take up a posture, asana, in the mind, manasana they're called, in order to master one's awareness and attain to yoga, union with ultimate reality, will bring about what has been called by luminaries everywhere as balance of mind, steadiness of mind, equanimity of mind, purity of mind, equipoise, all leading to peace of mind, or, quote, the peace that passeth all understanding, unquote, is how Jesus put it. So yoga is oneness with Brahman. It is equanimity of mind constantly without any deviations and breaks. It's like pouring oil from one beaker to another. They call that Tailadhara Dhyan, a meditation where your mind is so focused on Brahman that nothing ever interrupts it. And you don't come out of that attention on Brahman until your meditation ends. Eventually you never come out of it. This is why Holy Mother said to us, does God exist only when eyes are closed? Cease to exist when eyes open? So they can close their eyes and be focused on Brahman, open their eyes and be focused on Brahman. But for the practitioner then, who's getting rid of the rust or intensifying sadhana, then they're going to have periods of Tailadhara Dhyan, where when they're in meditation, they're so focused that the world goes away. Noises go away, sounds go away, bird song goes away, the brook you're sitting next to, sound of that goes away. Thoughts of dinner, thoughts of death, thoughts of everything go away. And you're just very focused in this humming vibration, which is synonymous with the Word, which is one with God and which was God. So in that way, beings need to take up mental postures that are more and more steady like that, and this is what they're going to have to avoid in the animalistic and in the Bahu-Vricha Marg and some of these other margs, pathways that we've just been talking about. That is Pavritti Marg and so forth. So things like religion is false. God does not exist. There is no soul. I seek pleasure. Wealth is the goal of life. I only live once. I am the body. The world is real. Objects can make me happy. Those are the kind of things which a worldly mind will entertain, even in the face of being told otherwise. That is, a guru or teacher, preceptor, acharya, even a well-intentioned friend or elder can come along and talk with them about these perspectives, and they will still hold them. And these are negative mental postures that bind one. And they're nails that are turning rusty and are about to form into thinking complexes that will attend them to their death, and then of course will come back in their next lifetime. We think sometimes that a baby is all a pure slate. It's not at all true whatsoever. In most cases, it's a clean slate if it had a conscious death, an illumined life previously. Otherwise, it's a bucket of rusty nails, or nails that are prone to rust or about to rust. It's got a lot of mixed samskaras in it, and karmas to work out desires, to work out, basically is what you're saying. So here we're making another connection. Samskaras, karmas, and desires. Those three go together. So vasana, samskara, vasana, karma, samskara. Vasana is desires that you put into action, that bring karma to you, that give you certain experiences, that then form samskaras of thinking in your mind because you had those experiences. Some of them are about pleasure. I seek pleasure. Some of them are fearful. Some of them are hopeful. And some of them are deluded. Some of them are the opposite of truth. Absolute opposite of what truly is. And they're holding these in the mind. That's just a nail left out in the rain, in a bucket. Here's some more. Worldly knowledge is best. That would be the materialistic path, wouldn't it? Matter is all there is. A Freudian slip, sorry. I always like to say mother is all there is. In this case, it's matter is all there is. I seek only my own good. That's not a virya person. That's an animalistic. I am better than others. That's the ego squeaking or speaking. Ignorance is bliss. That's a good one, isn't it? Not true at all. The body's health is paramount. No, the body will be healthy if the mind is healthy. So the mind's health is paramount. The body will follow suit, anything the mind does. So don't let anyone from a doctor to your grandmother with a bowl of chicken soup tell you otherwise. All diseases begin in the mind, and then they end up in the body. Which is why you need to look at the body as 10 pounds of ash in the end. Use it as a temple as far as possible, but do not return to it again. My race is superior to others. No. And only my religion is true. So these run the gamut from personal, individual, to collective, all the way up to potentially cosmic or religious and philosophical. They will hold these stances, hold these postures, see. And not knowing that there will be some very negative results and bad karmas that will come out of holding these kinds of thoughts. Here's Sri Ramakrishna's take on it. It is all a question of the mind. Bondage and liberation are of the mind alone. If one holds false thoughts, then the world seems real and God disappears from sight. Further, it will not do to merely repeat, I am he, I am he. Beings get free by following up affirmations with spiritual discipline. In the case of the worldly, they never think about God even by accident. If they do not find the right mental perspective, it lasts only, if they do find the right mental perspective, it lasts only about as long as a drop of water on a red-hot frying pan. Each one of those sentences is a pearl. They connect together very well, but each one of those sentences says something very profound about the nature of samskaras, karmas, people's temperaments, their lifetimes, and their inability to seek higher wisdom, to move from lower truth to higher truth, as we just said. There you see the courtesan has turned away, sitting on her wealth, which she desires more than anything, turned her back on the Buddha. And the Buddha represents what? Transcendence, service, at the service of God and mankind, selflessness, compassion, forbearance, supporting others, positivity of mind, love of God, spirituality, generosity, humility, universality, wisdom, truth, freedom, equanimity, and sensitivity, to name a few of the divine qualities of a Buddha, or of a rishi, or of a knower of Brahman. So all of these things, what about them? Why don't they show up in the worldly? Or sometimes these are the very things that they want to get rid of if they're evil-minded. They won't have any of these things, starting with sensitivity all the way up to the idea that they could actually transcend sufferings, karma, and evil doing. So all of these things have to be put in a kind of perspective, because then, of course, there's always the problems that they sing about. They even sing about them. Shukir vashana karo arkade, Shukir vashana karo arkade, Taji anyobo, Kali kalibo, Manabo janamo jadin. Ho tui Taji anyobo, Kali kalibo, Manabo janamo jadin. Shukir vashana karo arkade, Shukir vashana karo arkade. Kamala kanta aiye branta, Bule sho namashnadin. Kamala kanta rashi rashi, hare bare ashi dukha rashi rashi, jatan shabe arkadin shukir, ashana karo arkadin shukir, ashana karo arkadin. And the song rolls on like that, verse after verse. Kamalakanta doing his very best to try and convince us that if you're bewildered by Maya in these pathways, these veiled pathways and doorways, and holding these false perspectives, you're not only cheating yourself of a beautiful, blissful spiritual life and all the kingdoms of heaven within you, but you've forgotten the 9 months and 9 days of suffering in your mother's womb, and how misery and pain are the outcome of limited thinking. This is what he said. How many more lives of ignorance can I bear? He concludes. So he's tired of his own soul, his own mind, feeding him these false pathways and these false perspectives when it's obvious what he needs to do and how he needs to transform his mind. So he's going to have to get into the very roots of those samskaras and take them apart, if he has them. So we have to inspect our minds as an Eskimo inspects snow conditions. We have to look at it every day. It's called meditation. Because you can't look at it in the midst of action. It looks like a chameleon. It looks like a roadrunner. Oh, I saw it. Oh, you didn't see very much of it. I think it had a tail, maybe a beak. That's all I saw, you see. So the mind, you can't look at it in action when it's running. You have to stop it and look at it. There's 2 advantages to stopping the mind. One is that you'll see that it's not real. And number 2, you can see that it can be shut down and the reality will come forward from behind it. See what's the foundation of it. Everything that the mind cognizes comes from the Atman, as the Mundaka Upanishad says. All cognition comes from the Atman. So these are just instruments that I'm using, given to me by the Divine Mother of the Universe, so I can see my true nature in any condition, in any situation. If I'm championing thoughts like this, then it's never going to come my way. And misery and suffering in 9 days and 9 nights, 9 months and 9 days and nights of suffering in the mother's womb will be the result. Every time in rounds. Rounds that I won't even remember once I'm through them. So I'm not even looking back at the mind that thinks it's being reborn, because it believes that if it believes I'm the body, then that's only the beginning, right? Then it has to see itself as a body in the next time, and then another body, and then another body. One of my students just sent me this picture on the computer the other day. It's this corpse of a dead buffalo, and there's a jackal standing over it, growling at a vulture who's trying to take a piece of it, and dozens of flies are floating around. And so I knew what he meant. He's somewhere in the night. He said, "Maybe we never come back to this horrible world again." So jackal, they're all after this dead carcass, you see. Flies getting a little bit of it, and then vulture taking a piece. The jackal mad at it because anger because it's taking its food, all feasting on this carrion. So this is how a discriminating soul would view the world of name and form, time and space and causation in this kind of perspective. Well, mental perspectives that stymie spirituality, and that's only half of it, folks. The other half is that it builds some samskaras that are going to hinder you getting any higher view in another lifetime. This is why people are suffering lifetime after lifetime and never getting a higher view. They don't think of God. How? Even by accident, as Ramakrishna said. Now this is the avatar of the age telling us these beings don't even think of God even by accident. So what did I quote in the first half? To expect that an evil man will not do evil is insanity. This is their nature. Yes, Atman is behind the evil nature. It's behind the good nature. And of course it is the transcendent nature. But that doesn't stop them from not realizing it. And why? Because of the samskaras based on karmas that were based on desires. So let's, in the remaining time, let's look at a little bit at that. There's a chart that I created some time ago called Samskaras in the Human Mind, and got a facelift because I'm colorizing all these old charts, some 320 of them now. I think 140 got colorized as of today. And I colorized this today so I could show it to you. But last night I was working on the lower truth to higher truth, so they're quickly getting their colorized versions, fully mature versions. These are glimpses of Dharma, every one of them. So there's some 320 glimpses of Dharma now I want to share with everyone and leave behind as a SRV heritage, so people get interested in really getting clear about their true nature or what's keeping them from realizing their true nature. They can say samskara or samskara skandha, and they can begin looking into how to take those samskaras apart and be free. In Buddhism it's called the 12 links, or the word in Pali is nidana. They're links that, like a chain, that hook together over 3 lifetimes. And people can't break them after 3 lifetimes. The 3 lifetimes it would take to break the 12 links, which would be things like conditioning, wrong thinking, wrong perspective, and wrong action, and wrong thinking. The things it would take to break those would be hearing the truth and contemplating the truth, and then that's 1 lifetime to uncover that you're bound. The fact that you're bound, because most of these people are not thinking they're bound, are they? They're attached to matter. Should we go back to the path that is the materialistic path and show you? Lokayatika marg. See, this is their path. It might as well be a religion. Science might as well be a religion. And it might as well have its friend, materialism. But if your religion is divine reality, then your friend's going to be Dharma and wisdom teachings and lower truth to higher truth. So all of this is the way India is presenting it, you see, over time to us, to waken us up or reawaken us. As it's not that I'm sitting here browbeating people or lashing out at them. Maya is thick. And when you come into it, even the illumined souls gasp. I mean, there's songs about this. See, they suffer the lashes of the whips of pain that come with taking on the body. And, drawing your first breath, you don't remember how painful that is. So when he says 9 months and 9 days of suffering in the mother's womb, that's just a part of it. When you actually are born and you take your first breath, these are very tender and it hurts. You see, try and use your eyes and get your consciousness to look with your eyes. It's painful. It's full of suffering. Hearing strange things is fearful. So you're just developing little physical worm. You see, you're just this little worm. Almost not many bones in it even yet. You see, Sri Ramakrishna used to say that. Vaknapok. Men are mere worms. He would use that expression. There in Bengal, when he saw the weak Hindus, you see, not living up to their dharma, fallen so far from the truth. So, the samskaras are a big thing, and I wish we had the word for it in Western psychology, but they're not entertaining it. Freud, Jung, they won't entertain it. If there had have been an Oriental person or a Hindu person on Freud's therapy table or at one of his sessions, he would have said, "What are you talking about? I've had many lifetimes. And so have you, Mr. Freud." But they weren't thinking that. They haven't thought about that because they've been living lifetimes in what path? Materialism. In how are they living it? As a psychologist, preoccupation with facts and figures, gathering information for ego gratification, secular subjects gained for conventional means, knowledge utilized for altruistic motives, we hope. That this is the way they're doing it. Teaching for selfish gain and profit, scholarship to gain fame. Isn't that the way people live? In the secular path? In the intellectual path? In the scholastic path? In school? In what we call education? Without the slightest idea of the Divine Mother of the Word who's giving them this wisdom. From inside out. And inside they know nothing about. Nothing. You wouldn't be surprised then to have Swami Vivekananda show up in 1893 and say, "Oh, I see you're mere babies, spiritually speaking. You don't know anything. Marvelous that you can do this with electricity, and you're creating an electric light, Mr. Tesla, and and you can sing well, Madame Bacalva, but you don't know anything about your true self. What is this? This is a world of Tinseltown." He said, "What a frippery civilization the Westerners have created." I'm quoting him directly from his letters. I know these letters because I've read them. What a frippery civilization the Westerners have created. He was hearing the English speak, so he was picking up these expressions from them, you see. Ne'er-do-well. You like that one, you see. People were ne'er-do-wells. They never do well, you see. And so he would use these to, wake us up. You're mere babies. You don't know anything about your true self. So return to this path via finding out what's keeping your mechanism from moving. If you're a tin man, what do you want to watch out for? Rust. You might want to get a heart and a brain too, as the Wizard of Oz tells us. So in that way then, find the tools for keeping this corrosion of consciousness at bay. And so if you want to look at what a samskara really is, like I was saying, I wish we had a word for this. The closest word in Western psychology would be complex. But mental impression in English gives a better reckoning, I think. If you say complex, you say, oh, we got habits, we have obsessions, we drink a lot, we smoke, it's not good for us. It's all on the kind of health mixed with morality level, right? Your 12-step program has you getting healthier and then going towards religion, which is just a mess of morality, but then nothing higher in it. You think, oh, I've reached the highest step, you haven't even begun your spiritual path yet. You're still back to where you started with morality and religion. But beyond that is Dharma and Swadharma, isn't it? I mean, that's why I showed these paths. Conventional religion is not going to be very much higher. It's just that you fell from conventional religion and you really put yourself through a lot of suffering. By the time your methodology in the West brought you back, you were just back to conventional religion again. With some God who says, good boy, and pats you on the back. But Divine Mother saying, that was really, a bad path you fell into. You see, shame on you. Now that you're back to square one, let's see what we can do to lift you up and out of this suffering and this ignorance. So they're going to have to point out to you these tendencies, mental impressions. If you say mental impression rather than complex, because complex will, again, give you that kind of idea of illness, right? Oh, I have a complex. But mental impression means, oh, something got impressed on my mind. Then let's see, what is my mind? Can I open up my brain and see the impressions that my mind, that my thoughts made on my mind, on my brain? No. It's like shoot a BB at a wall, you see a little impression, you see. But you can't do that with the mind, so your thought was this sort of like the psychic Kleenex, or sort of like this psychic BB that you shot at the wall of your thinking process, and it held an impression in there. Some bad experience you had. Like I used to say, cut yourself, wait for it to heal. Scar tissue. Cut yourself again. Wait for it to heal. More scar tissue. That's one of the ways in which they describe a samskara. It's just scar tissue on the mind. So mental impression is good. Samskara, then, you can see here, what are some of those mental impressions? You can see here that the first quote says by Sri Ramakrishna, the body is born to work out its karmas from past lives, or to be of service to others. It is all up to the inborn tendencies called samskaras. Well, thank God he brings in some positive samskaras for us. There's Babaji sitting here reading the Riot Act on negative ones. But it all depends on inborn samskaras or tendencies. Repeated births in this world make one believe that Maya is real. So it all of a sudden throws us a change-up. You know what a change-up is when you're a pitcher? You see, look like you're really going to throw a fast one. All of a sudden, ball comes real slow at you and you swing too early, you see. What a fool. So he's throwing us a change-up here. See, repeated births and deaths in this world make you think that Maya is real. So can I go back to the past again? Materialism, fundamentalism, secularism, religious convention, they believe that their life in the world is real. But they're having lifetime after lifetime again in an unreal world. Finite things can never satisfy the mind of an unawakened person. They can never satisfy the mind of an awakened person either, because they change all the time. So it's like trying to watch the mind, that roadrunner that just ran by. If you didn't sit in meditation and slow it down, oh, I see you now. You have 2 feet and some funny looking feet, you know. Now you can see the mind as a critter as you slow it down, so you sit in meditation. So same way, if you sit in meditation long enough, and Buddha will attest to this in his long sit under the bo tree, and Christ will attest to this in his long trip in the wilderness, and Muhammad will attest to this in his trip up to the mountain, and Moses will attest to this, and Abraham in their long penetration and alienation from their own country. They'll all say that when they looked at the mind and they saw that it was full of conditionings. Buddha called it Mara. It's basically the devil. The devil's in the mind. It's not a horned creature somewhere. It's your own wrong perspective is devilish. And if you want to take it and form it into a devil, then you're even worse off than you were when it was just a disparate devil. You see, a bunch of little devils. It's a samskara skanda. So you begin to think that Maya is real, and so you don't think that reality is real. You don't think that Divine Mother is real. You don't think that the Lord of the universe is real. You don't think that Dharma is real. You don't think that higher wisdom is real, so there's no path leading to it for you. It's rusted shut. You can't move along it. Can't open it. So that's the change-up he throws us, is that that's the result of thinking, of harboring samskaras. And even positive ones will keep you bound. One's an iron chain, one's a gold chain. The great teachers bring that out a lot. You can't just have conventional religion, you see, and have good thoughts about God and heaven and think that that's going to get you free, because that's not the truth. There is no heaven, there is no God. You're God, and this might as well be heaven or hell or any other place for that matter. There's only one reality. It doesn't have a form and it doesn't have a place. There's no space for it. It can't take up space. And you'd have to go to a Zen teacher, an Advaita Vedanta teacher, or some other Buddhist teacher to find out about this non-dual path, which was the fourth of those paths, right? Dualism being one of them, ignorance being another, yoga of transformation. Even when you're practicing yoga, you're not in view of the truth yet. You're trying to become in view of the truth. It's only when you reach Advaita Vedanta that you realize the truth, that you cannot say there's a God. I mean, I was talking about Krishnamurti in his talks I was watching on YouTube recently. And all the Hindus, you've got millions of gods, but there's no God, he said. Someone asked him, is there a God? And he said, no. This is a godlike man. So Buddha was much the same way. Kapila, much the same way. Patanjali, father of yoga, much the same way. They did not admit to a God. And if they personally believed in the God, they didn't use it as a point of emphasis. People have tried to reform others by religion and God, and it's never worked very well. It's caused guilt, it's caused more sin, it's caused shame, and it's caused turning away from the path. Even when the Buddha is right there, turn away. We were talking about this. My teacher was always saying at my ashram, when I went there, at his ashram, arrogant Americans. He would use that expression every day. You're arrogant Americans. And, you know, if I had looked at the Americans and chose my favorite negative quality for them, I wouldn't have chosen arrogance. But now I understand that he was exactly right. Americans are arrogant. And they'll put on a fair face to hide that. But inside they think they know best. They won't take a teacher, they won't take a guru, they won't use the mantra, they won't study the scriptures and believe in them, they won't have faith. They're arrogant to the very bone. They think they know best with their power, with their materialism, with their atom bombs, with their medicines, with their intellectual knowledge. They don't know the one essential thing. I and my Father are one. I am Buddha nature. Pure mind is God. That the ego is not God. That God isn't an individual. It's not individual, it's indivisible. And so this one most subtle shard or shred of highest understanding is the hardest to detect. It's buried under most of the rust. Sri Ramakrishna said, people's gold, their Atman, is buried under mounds of earth. You have to dig a long time to find it. But he said some souls, like Naren, it's shining right at the surface. Just brush away a few pebbles. There it is. They don't have any problems, or any doubts, or any fears, or any worries, or any attachments, or any wealth, or any families. They're free. And they make sure they're free in each lifetime. If they're not free, they find out why. So I quote another thing from Vivekananda's letters. I will find out what this world is, whether it's a bugaboo or something else. I will find it out and I'll let you know. I'll tell you. So he found out it was Maya, just like he found out in other lifetimes. And he found this out to convince you, because if he does it in your very sight, like Ramakrishna did in the sight of the Bengalis in 1838 to 1880, 836 to 1886, and he's doing it right there, he's showing you a man whose mind is free of samskaras. So in the time remaining, we have to start near the bottom. Root ignorance, tendency towards cyclic transmigration is what's the foundation of these base samskaras. I'm taking only the ones in the bordered boxes really quickly. Desire for pleasure and power, a samskara in the human mind. Habits and attachments form samskaras. Agency, name, fame, selfishness, attraction to wealth, and lassitude, slothfulness, rust, you see, of families is a samskara in the human mind. These are all negative. Now here you get to mixed samskaras. So some of the mixed samskaras are, that is, part negative, part positive, energy, morality, proper orientation, altruism. These stand in the border between negative samskaras and positive samskaras in your mind. These are admixtures. So if you watch your mind, you'll think sometimes, oh, I want to do something good for some person. The next thought will be, I don't like that person, I'm not going to do good to them. But I don't wish ill or good to anyone. I just don't want anything to have to do with them if they're not in the Dharma, because it's going to be futile. See? futile for them. You're just encouraging them to go back to their samskaras. That's not why I'm here. It's to break down the samskaras and let people free. I'm quoting Vivekananda again. I want people to be free as the air they breathe. I want people to be free as the air that they breathe. So if you get along then around to the positive samskaras, your actions, your merits, and your deeds start to figure in. Doesn't it sound a little bit like virya as compared to pasu? Now onward, mental capacity and intelligence is a positive samskara. Yay for the soul that we find walking amongst us who has capacity, capaciousness. See, they're wide open. They're open to anything. They want to learn. And their intelligence is intact, so they can. There are people who are supposedly open-minded, but they don't have much intelligence. So you might give them some good idea and they may burn up like straw on fire, but then they may not hold it very long. Quoting Vivekananda again. Finally, down there in the most positive of positive samskaras you can have, abilities for divine life and conscious embodiment. And that's the samskara of a seer who still wants to come back and help you out of suffering, or help the awakened to perfect themselves to become illumined. So unawakened, awakened, illumined. They have an eye towards the suffering and fallen, yes, but what a drag to have to go back and pull people out of messes they got themselves in. Be much more tempted to say, oh, you're almost there, let me help you. I'll show you that, I'll move the last impediment for you, and then you walk in, and I want to celebrate with you when you arrive. See? But I have to go all the way back to these people and work on these. Well, what are some of these? Birth, that is, what's in a samskara? Your births, your gender, that is your gender orientation and experiences, what your lives were like, your personality, that is your ego, how you died and how you got reborn because of that death. So birth, life, and death is a huge samskara for people. And they don't even know and believe in reincarnation yet. See the conundrum? Birth, life, and death is the makeup of their main samskara, and they don't even believe in reincarnation. This is how thick Maya can become. You can't explain anything, even from your highest intellectual standpoint, like Freud and Jung, if you don't know that you've lived many times, and that the actions you're doing right now are based upon things you did in your past lifetime. That your body, the way your eyes are, how far apart your eyes are set, the shape of your nose, how your forehead is broad or narrow, if you're pigeon-breasted or huge chest, if you don't know the physiognomy of your own body and how that connects back to your past lifetimes, then it's just all randomness. You might as well be an animal, i.e. pasu, i.e. bahutva, i.e. secularism, i.e. materialism, i.e. mitjagyan. So we don't even believe in reincarnation, but the main samskara you're holding in your mind is how I'm living, what kind of desires I'm satisfying, how they're getting frustrated, how that leads me to a bitter death, and how I'm born again unhappy. Do you want to sing the song again? Kamalakanta says, I've spent 9 months and 9 days in my mother's womb. Next then, the next samskara would be around craving, ego obsession, the urge to dominate, and body identification. These are 4 main elements of a negative samskara. So put those together and you've got pretty much what a samskara is made of. Is it a great mystery? I mean, you hear the word samskara at some Vedanta class or in Buddhism or something, and you think, oh, that must be just so hard to understand. Oh, it's too mystical for me, it's too esoteric, it's too deep, I can't understand the philosophy. Is that hard for you to understand? When you take it apart and look at it? That birth, life, and death And your experiences in them, as the Nidanas of Buddhism tell you, have formed conditionings that make you think and act the way you are thinking and acting, and also the people around you, and why you're born with certain ancestors. Oh, that's coming, see. And also then, how you crave for things, how your ego gets obsessed with things and can't let them go, like even a Kleenex in your hand. And you want to dominate over others. You're bound and you want to make others bound. Why not get free and make others free? Try something different for a lifetime, for change. That's how Vivekananda spoke to the Hindu boys. You've had wives and wealth and families for lifetimes. Can you give them all up just one lifetime to me and get free, and I'll show you how to free others? Isn't it like Jesus 2,000 years earlier saying, I'll make you fishers of men. All you have to do is come to me and learn. Learn that birds have nests, foxes have holes, but you have no place to lay your head here, because this is the land of rust, of Maya, of samskara formation. Turned into salt pillars. It's like almost biblical. You got salt pillars, in your mind. You have to break them down. Next is agency, name, fame, selfishness, attraction to wealth, and lassitudinousness. I preempted that. I jumped to it too soon, but that's another samskara in your mind. My name and my fame is very important to people. They come out the womb, they begin to grow, they're already beginning to dominate over their little playmates. And they're already feeling themselves superior to them, or inferior, as the case may be, or back and forth. And they're starting to play games already with power and domination and sense of agency. I'm doing this. It's my work. I'm successful. I'm a failure. The whole thing is playing years upon years. That is months upon months. That is days and days and days. That is minutes and minutes and minutes of thinking this way. And you see why a seer would look at someone like that and say, my gosh, see, how am I? It's beyond me. It's like sometimes I said, Divine Mother, allowed this Maya to effloresce, you see. And then she's brought beings into it. Okay, you want to play in that Maya? Go ahead, let's see. It's a big sandbox for you there. You see. Some will make sandcastles, some will defecate in it. See, we'll see what happens. See, but then when they saw what craziness the human being got into, she was shocked. She thought, I thought I knew more about Maya. They know much more than me about it. They're unbridled in their viciousness and their vileness, you see. And now they're living in that and creating samskaras for it. War is a samskara. See, domination over others, yes, but then pretty soon you want to do it on the individual and collective level. You want to dominate over whole countries. You maybe dream of being a ruler of the whole world. Right here in Hawaii, we have King Kamehameha. Let's see, how many islands are there? How can I bring them together under my control? Why would we worship people like that? Why would they become famous? Because they have some scars for that, and so do we. And they're bad examples for us. Oh, look they dominated this and that. Napoleon, Attila the Hun, Alexander the Great, the Romans, even the English finally became the greatest of them all. See, the mouse that roared. Little tiny island that dominated most of the world. Bad example for everyone of what, or a very good example of what not to do if you are interested in spiritual life. Freedom, that is. If you're interested in bondage, have fun, go ahead, play in the fields of the Lord. But you could maybe get your energy refined. You could start thinking in terms of morality, proper orientation, right perspective, and maybe altruism might enter in. Gee, I think I'll start to help people. It just feels better than hurting them. Somehow. I don't know how, but somehow. So some little inkling of higher intelligence or better sense enters into their mind, and they do something good, and it makes them feel better. No, wrong. Usually not. Because they have all these paths they're running along, and they're not going to change. Samskaras dictate the pace of life, and they stymie spirituality. They stymie it. It's not going to get a hold in their mind. Very rare then to find people who seek truth, higher wisdom, peace instead of power. My teacher said once from the podium, if you want peace, you'll seek God and get God. If you want power, you'll get Rolls Royces. Never mentioned any names, but we know who he was talking about. They both had ashrams in Oregon. So you don't seek power and dominate over others, store up arms, fight with people, try and insinuate your ego and its doings on other beings. You'd rather seek proper orientation, altruism, and so forth. Also, aptitude, higher learning, positivity, religious faith come to those beings. These are higher and higher things. The samskaras get better and better. If you're born with these kinds of things, then you know you're at the end of your series of lifetimes, at least in ignorance. You might come back again in wisdom to help others, but you won't have another unconscious or ignorant birth again if you see these things start showing up in you. Do you have them? Aptitude, desire for higher learning, lower truth to higher truth we just went through, positivity of mind, the ability to desire to help others, and faith in your religious path. Do you have devotion to your guru? I'm quoting Swami Vivekananda. You need guru bhakti, first and foremost. Devotion to your teacher, because there's no one like him or her in the three worlds. Holy Mother used to say, oh, people say avatar this, avatar that. Their own little teacher is the best for them. It's better than Ishvara. Your teacher sitting right there in front of you is better, because where's the Ishvara when you need him? Your guru came into form to help you. There he is sitting right there. There she is right there. Lived in a lifetime, just like you, in a body. And now is the living epitome and example of how to walk a spiritual path. Holy Mother said to us then, I've done far more than was necessary to be an example for you, for your spiritual life. I've done far more than was necessary. So she did way more than was needed to show us how to get free. We've got to follow her. It's the responsibility of freedom again. You know, we say about, oh, he died for nothing. Well, if it's just a worldly person, let him die for nothing. They say, my teacher said, oh, they say, paradise is lost. He said, let it be lost. It was a dream to begin with. See? So if it's just a worldly person that died for nothing, no big deal, because he was living for nothing. But if she comes here and lives and dies for nothing, and we don't follow her, and when she was the full exemplar of the light of Brahman, then who are we? See? What did we attain? So our samskaras are signs that are leading us towards that. If we recognize her as the mother of the universe and him as the avatar of the age, then that's probably the most positive samskara you can have. And here it is described right here then to end this class. You serve others, you gain higher wisdom, you have compassion for their sufferings, you gain peace of mind and illumination. The light of consciousness is yours again. Whereas before you had lost it. Where did it go? I can't reach my brain. So, a couple minutes left. Let's finish up this chart, because next week I want to show you the makeup of a samskara skandha. That is, how these things get together and fuse like a bucket of rusty nails. And there's the brain, as it were. There's all these positive, negative, and mixed samskaras in them. I want to start off next week's class with that, but in the meantime, let's finish this chart with these two quotes. Lord Vashishta says, the liberated soul embodies at will, utilizing the subtle force of pure desires, whereas other beings are dragged back into the form via karma-based desires and the many samskaras that are duly formed thereby. So one of the great rishis of India, speaking in terms of samskaras. He also says, through the newly engendered body, a series of dreamlike lives are conjured up by the mind's power of sankalpa. And the residue from egoic actions done therein collect in the mind as samskaras. So from all sides we're seeing different sages and different seers and contemporary teachers, even down to my own humble self, trying to explain to you about the makeup of your mind. And this makeup is causing you to act and think in a certain way, and has caused you to act and think since you were first born, after you spent 9 months and 9 days in your mother's womb again. Now, how to change that, how to sand off that rust, how to clear those channels, knowing for certain that samskaras are responsible for your behavior, how you think and act, and the karmas and the experiences that you're having, good, bad, and mixed. Follow the good, bad, and mixed samskaras in your mind, and the gunas are just waiting to ripen them. Every day the gunas are just sitting there waiting to fructify that bad experience for you, or that good one. You're at risk all the time. And then how to gain equanimity of mind, balance of mind, steadiness of mind, purity of mind, equipoise, the peace that passes all understanding, that puts me up and above all this talk about samskaras and the complexes that can form. So we'll look at that next week as we read the Riot Act on our own heads, you see, on our own minds, and take it to task and to clear it out. Just like letting air into a stuffy room. You can think of it as that simple. Once you become aware of the teaching, then you entertain the solution. It shouldn't take you more than a day or two or a week or a month to air out that stuffy room of the mind and think differently, feel differently, act differently, and then be yourself again. That's self with a capital S. So we'll talk more about that next week. Let's end here then with that famous chant we just studied. Om Sato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamoya Mritchor Ma Amritam Gamaya Abira Bira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth. Lead us from the unreal to the real. And lead us from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother of the universes, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.